The night Liora Hensley first heard the hoofbeats outside her cabin, she knew deep in her bones that whoever rode toward her wasn't coming for mercy. The sound was too controlled, too steady, too deliberate. A rider who wanted to be heard. The lantern flickered as a blast of cold desert wind pushed through the cracks in the wooden walls, bringing with it the scent of dust, pine, and something metallic. Like danger itself. Liora tightened her grip on the shotgun, though she knew the weapon was half-rusted and unreliable. Her breath trembled in her chest. Her husband, Abram, should have been home hours ago, and the silence of the mesa pressed down on her like a warning. Then came the knock, slow, heavy, and carved with intent. Not Abram, not a neighbor. Something else. She stepped toward the door, her pulse a wild drum beneath her skin, and with every step she whispered to herself, "Stay steady, Liora. Stay steady." 30 years had taught her many things, but nothing prepared her for opening that door and finding a wounded Apache warrior leaning against the frame. His dark, storm-filled eyes met hers, unwavering. His braided hair was streaked with dust, his bare shoulders painted with drying blood, and his breath came in tight, pained gasps. He was young, near her age, but carried the weight of 100 battles in the tension of his jaw. He didn't raise his weapon. He didn't threaten her. He simply said, voice raw, "I need help." 1,000 instincts ripped through her at once: fear, caution, the urge to slam the door. But something in his eyes stopped her. A flicker of honesty. Or desperation. Liora swallowed. "Who are you?" "Name is Nashoba," he rasped, sagging a little against the frame. "Warriors from another band tried to trap my group in the canyon south. I fought my way out. But I won't last long without tending." He lifted his hand, showing her a deep slice across his ribs. "Didn't come to harm you. Only came because your fire was still burning." Her fire. A signal she hadn't realized she'd sent. She hesitated, torn between everything society had drilled into her and the reality breathing heavily on her porch. Nashoba wasn't threatening her. Yet he wasn't safe either. And with Abram gone, with Abram choosing to be gone again, she was alone. But the man was bleeding out. If she turned him away, she'd be leaving a human being to die on her doorstep. If she let him in, she was inviting danger, possibly betrayal, into her home. Her voice came out hoarse. "If you try anything, I'll shoot." His lips curved, not quite a smile, more like a weary acknowledgement. "Then I will not try." She stepped aside. Nashoba entered with the slow, cautious grace of a hunted animal, scanning every corner of the small cabin before easing himself into the chair near the fire. Liora kept the shotgun raised, though her arm shook from the weight of it. His next words surprised her. "You are brave for someone so afraid." She stiffened. "Fear keeps people alive. It keeps them small," he murmured. Liora ignored the sting in his tone and grabbed a cloth, whiskey, and her sewing needle. Her hands trembled as she approached him. Up close, the wound looked vicious, claw-like, jagged, angry. He winced only slightly when she pressed the cloth to it. Most men cursed. Most men fought. This man bit down on nothing, held nothing, and simply endured. "Someone meant to kill you," she muttered. "Yes, someone often does." Their eyes met in the firelight, and in that moment she sensed it, the quiet intelligence behind his gaze, the heavy burden he carried. Nashoba wasn't just a warrior. He was someone important among his people. But she said nothing, and he didn't offer more. As she stitched his wound with careful, shaking hands, the cabin creaked under the wind. Coyotes howled in the distance, and the weight of the moment settled around them, two strangers, two worlds that should never meet, bound together by necessity. When she finished and wrapped the bandage, Nashoba exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing. "You saved my life," he said quietly. I didn't do it for you, she replied. I did it because I couldn't watch someone die. Nashoba's eyes narrowed slightly, thoughtful. And because your husband is not here. Her stomach tightened. That's none of your concern. No, he nodded. But it will become yours soon. She frowned. What do you mean? The warrior looked toward the window, where darkness pressed like a living thing. Because the men who tried to kill me, Nashoba said softly, will come here next. Liora's fingers tightened around the shotgun as Nashoba's warning echoed through the cabin like a ghost that refused to leave. The men who tried to kill me will come here next. The fire crackled in the hearth, but the warmth barely touched her. Outside, the desert night pressed against the windows listening, waiting. Somewhere far off, a coyote howled, the sound raw enough to raise the hair on her arms. Liora swallowed, her throat dry. Why would they come here? What does this place matter to them? Nashoba didn't answer immediately. He adjusted himself in the chair, wincing as the bandage tugged at his stitched flesh. His sharp gaze flicked toward the window again, as if he could see through the darkness. They will follow the blood trail. They are not men who give up the hunt. Liora's pulse pounded. She set the shotgun aside just far enough to free her hands, but close enough to grab if needed. You said they're from another Apache band? Yes. Nashoba's jaw tightened. But not loyal to any true leader. A breakaway group, lawless, hungry for power. They seize land, steal horses, take what isn't theirs. Liora felt the cold bite deeper. Then kill their own kind? If it serves them, Nashoba said. Silence folded over the cabin, heavy and suffocating. Liora stared into the fire, trying to make sense of the fear crawling under her skin. Nashoba's presence was unsettling, but the idea of violent men following him was worse. A new thought struck her like a slap. Abram. Her voice cracked. What if he's out there? What if he crosses paths with them? Nashoba studied her. Your husband. He is late returning? He's always late, she murmured bitterly. Always gone when I need him. But tonight, I don't know. I feel something is wrong. Nashoba's expression shifted, not sympathetic, but keen, observant. You carry fear for him. And anger. Liora bristled. You don't know anything about my marriage. No, he agreed softly. But I know the look of a woman who has been left to survive alone for too long. His words scraped something raw inside her. Abram was complicated, sometimes gentle, sometimes reckless, sometimes distant enough to feel like a stranger in her own home. His past clung to him like burrs in a horse's tail. He never spoke of it, but Liora felt the weight of secrets he carried. And now she wondered if those secrets had finally caught up with him. A sudden thud outside made her flinch violently. Nashoba was on his feet in an instant, despite the pain twisting his face. His hand went to the knife strapped to his belt. Stay behind me. Liora grabbed the shotgun, heart hammering. The shadows outside shifted across the window. Boots on dirt. Slow steps, controlled, like someone trying not to be heard. Her breath hitched. Another knock. No, not a knock, more like a deliberate drag of fingers across the wood. Nashoba moved silently toward the door, placing himself to the side. His body coiled like a wolf ready to strike. Who's there? Liora called, her voice thinner than she intended. A familiar voice answered. Liora. Open up. It's me. Her knees almost buckled. Abram? She rushed to the door, but Nashoba caught her arm. Wait, he's my husband, she hissed. Nashoba's eyes darkened. Even so, something is wrong. Liora hesitated, torn between instinct and trust she hadn't yet earned. But Abram called again, a little weaker this time. Liora, please. She shook off Nashoba's hand and yanked the door open. Abram stumbled inside, collapsing halfway over the threshold. His shirt was torn, his lips swollen, and one side of his face bruised purple as if struck with a rifle butt. Liora gasped. "Dear God, Abram." She knelt beside him. Abram looked up at her with bloodshot eyes, then shifted his gaze to Nashoba. His face contorted fear, suspicion, confusion all tangled. Why? Why is he here?" Nashoba stepped back, giving space but staying alert. "Your wife saved my life." Abram coughed a bitter laugh. "Of course she did." Liora glared at him. "What happened to you?" Abram swallowed hard, pain twisting his features. "I saw them," he whispered. "The men hunting him." He pointed weakly at Nashoba. "They were scouring the valley, asking about a cabin with smoke." Leora's breath caught. "They're coming," Abram rasped, "and they're not far behind." The cabin seemed to shrink around them. 3 breaths, 3 lives, 3 truths colliding under the trembling glow of the lantern. Liora steadied Abram against the wall, wiping dirt and blood from his cheek. His skin felt cold beneath her fingertips, and something inside her twisted painfully. He looked older tonight, worn down, shadowed by something worse than fear. "Tell me everything," she whispered. Abram swallowed hard. He avoided her eyes, looking instead at Nashoba, who stood like a carved statue, jaw tight, muscles coiled beneath scarred skin, tribal necklace catching the firelight. "They cornered me outside Miller's Ridge," Abram said finally. "Asked if I'd seen an Apache warrior with black hair carrying bone beads. Said he'd escaped them. They weren't." "Right, Liora. They moved like wolves. Eyes wild. Voices cold." Nashoba's gaze sharpened. "Did they give a name?" "No, but the one who spoke had a scar from his ear down to his chin." Abram shuddered. "He said they would finish what was started at Blood Creek." Nashoba exhaled slowly, a sound filled with memory and bitterness. "So it is Kade." Liora frowned. "You know him?" "He was once part of our band," Nashoba said. "Before he turned on my brother, challenged our chief, and murdered those who refused to follow him." His voice lowered, each word carrying the weight of old wounds. "He leads the breakaway group now, ambitious, unstable. If he wants me dead, it is not only for power, but revenge." Abram stared at him with wary eyes. "And now he's coming here?" "Yes," Nashoba replied. "And he will not come quietly." Leora's hand reflexively reached for the shotgun, though she knew the weapon could barely fire. Her mind raced, tangled with terror and anger and a strange, unsettling clarity. "We can't stay here," she said. "The cabin's too exposed." Nashoba nodded. "There is a canyon south of here, narrow, easy to defend. If we reach it before sunrise, we may have a chance." "We?" Abram echoed sharply. He tried to stand, but his wounded ribs forced him back down. "Liora, we can't run through the desert with him. This is between his people, not us." Nashoba's expression didn't shift. "They will kill anyone who helps me. And right now, that includes both of you." Liora met Abram's eyes and found something she hadn't expected. Not anger, not jealousy, something closer to shame. "Abram," she said softly, "we don't have a choice." Her husband closed his eyes, defeated. Nashoba began gathering what supplies he could reach without bending too far. Water satchel, rope, a shard of flint. His movements were slow and deliberate, his wound clearly aching, but he didn't complain. Liora forced herself to look away from the strength in his shoulders, the tension etched into every line of him. Abram noticed her gaze and muttered, "Be careful, Liora. He's not our friend." She stiffened. "He's also not our enemy. And you trust him?" She hesitated. Too long. Abram's jaw clenched. Nashoba finally spoke, voice deep and steady. I do not expect trust, only cooperation. We survive together or die alone. An uneasy silence settled. Then thunk. All three froze. Another thunk struck the side of the cabin. Wood splintered. Someone was outside. Leora's heart slammed into her ribs. Abram whispered, They're here. Nashoba moved instantly, extinguishing the lantern with a sharp breath and sweeping motion. Darkness devoured the room, except for the faint glow of dying embers in the hearth. Stay low, he murmured. Liora dropped to the floor beside Abram. Her breath trembled. Outside, boots scraped over dirt multiple pairs. Whispered voices in a language Liora couldn't understand floated through the cracks in the cabin walls. Nashoba crouched beside the window, listening. His muscles stiffened. Kade is with him. Liora swallowed. How can you tell? His voice. Nashoba's expression hardened into iron. He enjoys the hunt. Abram leaned close to Liora, whispering urgently, We have to leave while they're distracted. Nashoba shook his head. If we run now, they'll hear our footsteps. We wait. There is a moment between moonset and dawn when the wind shifts westward. It covers sound. That is when we move. How long until then? Liora whispered. Nashoba glanced at the window. 2 hours. 2 hours. 2 hours trapped in a dark cabin, surrounded by killers. Abram's breathing grew uneven. Liora squeezed his hand, trying to give strength she barely had. Outside, Kade's deep voice carried through the night. Find him. Search every cabin. Burn the ones you must. Leora's blood ran cold. Nashoba's hand brushed the hilt of his knife. His whisper was low and fierce. Stay quiet. Stay alive. And when the moment comes, run like the earth is on fire. The next 2 hours crawled by like wounded animals, slow and trembling. Every sound outside carved a new line of fear into Leora's chest. The men circled the cabin boots, crunching gravel, metal scraping against leather, the low growl of muttered voices. Once, someone rattled the doorknob. Another time, a shadow paused at the window so long Liora forgot how to breathe. But finally, the wind shifted. A cold, sweeping gust blew from the west, rattling the trees and carrying dust across the plains. The moment Nashoba had promised. He rose from his crouch, moving to the center of the room with the silent command of a wolf preparing its pack. It is time, he murmured. Abram struggled to stand. I can walk, he insisted through clenched teeth. You can limp, Nashoba corrected. But keep your weight on your left side. Liora slipped beneath Abram's arm to steady him, his body heavy with pain and fear. He leaned against her more than he admitted. She felt his shame in the tension of his jaw. Nashoba cracked the door open an inch and scanned the darkness. The raiders had moved east, toward the ridge. Their torches were small distant flickers, still too close, yet far enough. He turned back to them. Follow my steps exactly. Do not speak. Do not breathe loudly. And do not fall behind. Then he slipped into the night. Liora helped Abram after him. The cold hit immediately sharp, biting, carrying the scent of dust and danger. Her heart hammered against her ribs as the three of them crept through the darkness, the cabin shrinking behind them like a fading memory. The moon had sunk low, painting the desert in shades of silver and shadow. Sagebrush and twisted juniper trees crouched like watchful spirits across the land. Nashoba led them down a narrow path Liora swore hadn't existed moments ago. He moved with stealth despite his wound like a creature born of the land itself. How do you see in this? Abram whispered, barely audible. I listen, Nashoba replied softly. The night speaks if you stop drowning it with fear. Liora kept her gaze locked on his footsteps, forcing herself to place her boots exactly where his had fallen. Once her toe brushed a patch of gravel, and Nashoba stopped so abruptly she nearly collided with him. He raised his hand. Footsteps. Close. Liora's blood froze. Voices drifted from the ridgemen searching, calling out in a mix of English and rough Apache. She recognized one voice immediately. Kade. Deep, mocking, hungry. "Spread out," Kade barked. "He can't have gone far. Check every rock, every tree. The coward's bleeding, he won't make it through the night." Nashoba's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Liora caught a glimpse of him in the moonlight, strong shoulders rising and falling with controlled breath, long hair whispering against his back, tribal jewelry glinting faintly. He was the image of defiance wrapped in flesh. They waited. The wind gusted again. The voices drifted. Nashoba motioned them forward. After what felt like an eternity of weaving through shadowed brush and narrow gullies, the land suddenly opened into a canyon entrance, a narrow split in the red rock barely wide enough for two people. "Here," Nashoba whispered. "They cannot surround us inside. Only come from one direction." Abram stared at the rocky slit. "We're hiding in there?" "No," Nashoba said. "We're surviving in there." Liora helped Abram duck into the canyon. The walls rose around them like colossal guardians, cutting off the wind. The space inside widened slightly, enough for the three of them to stand. Nashoba knelt and pressed his hand to the dirt. His expression darkened. "They passed through earlier," he murmured. "Not Kade his men. They know this place." Leora's heart sank. "So we're trapped?" "No." Nashoba looked up at her, eyes fierce. "But we must be clever." He motioned for them to sit against the canyon wall. They did. The stone was cold against Leora's back. Abram rubbed his forehead. "If I hadn't talked to them, if I hadn't led them near the cabin." Liora touched his arm gently. "You came home. That's what matters." He looked at her, then really looked. Guilt rippled through his features. "Liora, there's something you need to know. I didn't just run into them. A sharp whistle cut through the canyon. Nashoba stiffened. "They've found our trail." Leora's pulse spiked. "But how?" "We were careful. Kade is a tracker as skilled as any elder," Nashoba said. "And he wants me alive long enough to suffer." Abram paled. "What do we do?" Nashoba rose to his full height, muscles tightening like drawn bowstrings. "We fight," he said quietly. "But not with force." He turned toward the canyon entrance, his expression a storm. "With the truth that brought Kade here." The canyon seemed endless in the dim moonlight, its jagged walls closing around them like the jaws of some ancient beast. Leora's arms ached from supporting Abram, whose breathing grew ragged with every step. Sweat burned her eyes, dust filled her lungs, and still the desert night stretched endlessly before them. Nashoba moved silently ahead, every motion precise, as if the earth itself were guiding him. His bare skin glimmered faintly in the moonlight, muscles tense beneath the scars that told stories of battles Liora could only imagine. She kept her gaze on him, a mixture of awe and fear twisting her chest. There was something almost otherworldly about him, an untamed presence that both comforted and unnerved her. Abram muttered weakly, "I don't know how much further I can go." "You can," Liora replied, her voice firmer than she felt. "You have to." Abram grimaced, leaning heavily on her shoulder. "I should have never gone out there alone. I brought this on us." Leora's heart tightened. "Stop blaming yourself. Right now we survive." Nashoba paused suddenly, crouching behind a jagged rock formation. "Voices," he whispered, almost a growl. "Several. They're closing in." Liora froze, straining to hear, and caught the faint murmur of men ahead. Their footsteps crunched softly against gravel, cautious but deliberate. Kade's voice carried, dark and triumphant. They couldn't have gotten far, Kade barked. Split up. Find them. Nashoba's jaw clenched. We have no choice. We must defend this position, quietly, swiftly. He scanned the canyon walls and gestured to a narrow ledge above. Up there. You two, follow me carefully. Don't stumble. Don't make a sound. I will cover you. Abram's eyes widened. Up there? I can barely walk. How do you expect me to? Do it or die, Nashoba interrupted, his voice low and sharp. There was no room for argument. With her hands shaking, Liora helped Abram hoist himself up the jagged rocks. Nashoba's strong grip steadied them both, his fingers like iron, guiding, lifting, shielding. Their feet slipped on loose gravel, but Nashoba's presence was a constant anchor. Once they reached the ledge, Liora crouched beside Abram, gasping from exhaustion. Nashoba moved ahead, crouching slightly above them, every muscle coiled, eyes scanning the canyon below. They'll be here soon, he whispered. Hold your nerve. Minutes passed like hours. The desert wind whistled through the canyon, carrying the voices closer. Liora's hands trembled on Abram's arm. They'll find us, Abram muttered. I can feel it. Nashoba's voice cut through the tension, calm but commanding. No, they will not find us if we act as one. Trust me. Trust each other. For a brief moment, Liora's gaze met Nashoba's. There was something raw and electric in that look, a mixture of fear, respect, and the unspoken knowledge that their fates were intertwined. Suddenly, a rustle came from below. A branch snapped underfoot. Liora froze, breath caught in her throat. She saw shadows moving, too many to count, slipping across the canyon floor. Nashoba shifted, muscles tensing. He reached for the small knife strapped to his belt, eyes narrowing. His movement was swift, precise. One fluid motion and a shadow fell silent. Another followed, then another. Abram's mouth fell open. He's incredible. Liora clenched her fists. Fear warred with awe. Nashoba wasn't just a warrior, he was survival incarnate. Every motion, every glance, every breath was honed for the night's deadly purpose. The attackers paused, voices confused, whispering to each other. Liora realized Nashoba had predicted their path perfectly. He'd funneled them into a trap, quiet, invisible, deadly. They'll panic if we hold, Nashoba whispered. Wait for the right moment. Minutes stretched. The tension coiled tighter. Finally, Kade's voice rang out, sharp and angry. Where are you? Show yourselves. Nashoba's dark eyes gleamed. Now, he muttered. In one swift motion, he leapt from the ledge, knife flashing, shadow merging with the night. Liora instinctively followed, shouting to Abram. Fear propelled them upward and forward, adrenaline igniting a courage they didn't know they possessed. Chaos erupted below as Nashoba struck with precision, every attacker falling silent or fleeing. Liora's heart raced, Abram's groan of exertion mingling with the distant yells. The canyon became a stage of shadows and moonlight, survival and fury intertwined. When the dust finally settled, Nashoba stood at the edge of the ledge, chest heaving but unbroken, his long black hair shimmering like dark fire. Liora and Abram collapsed beside him, hearts pounding, lungs burning. Nashoba's voice was low but firm. We survived this night, but Kade will not rest. We move at first light. The canyon protects us now, but only for a short time. Liora looked at him, chest heaving. I don't know what we would have done without you. He nodded, expression unreadable. You did your part. You fought your fear. That counts for more than most men. Abram, pale and exhausted, swallowed and murmured, I I owe you my life. Nashoba's eyes flicked between them. Then we owe each other survival, trust, loyalty, and the desert remembers all debts. For the first time since this nightmare began, Liora felt a spark of hope ignite in her chest, a fragile, flickering flame, but hope nonetheless. The night was far from over, but together they had survived. And somewhere deep in the canyon, Liora sensed that their lives had been changed forever. The first light of dawn crept cautiously across the canyon, painting the rocks in pale gold and crimson. Liora blinked against the brightness, the adrenaline of the previous night still burning in her veins. Abram leaned against her, exhausted, silent, every movement a reminder of how close death had lingered. Nashoba stood on a higher ledge, scanning the horizon with the eyes of a predator. His long black hair fell over his shoulders, catching the sun's early rays like dark silk, while the tribal jewelry around his neck clinked faintly with his subtle movements. Even after surviving the ambush, his body carried the tension of readiness muscles taut, knife at his side, senses attuned to every sound. "They'll be back," Nashoba murmured, his voice low, steady, almost a growl. "Kade will not forget the humiliation of last night. He'll rally men. This canyon will not hold him forever." Liora pressed a hand to Abram's arm, feeling the warmth and tremor beneath her fingers. "What do we do?" she asked quietly, though the words trembled. Nashoba turned, eyes dark and calculating. "We move before the sun climbs too high. There is a ravine beyond the ridge, a hidden pass. If we can reach it, no one will track us. Not Kade, not his men." Abram groaned softly. "I can't move fast." "Liora, you can't. I'll carry you if I have to," she interrupted firmly. "We leave together, or we stay to die here." Nashoba's gaze softened slightly. "Your determination is strong. Few survive because they fight as you do, not because of weapons or strength." Abram shot her a look of mingled guilt and relief. "I should have protected you better," he muttered. "You protected me by surviving," Liora replied sharply, "and by trusting me to help you." The canyon was quiet except for the whisper of wind brushing over stone and the distant call of a lone hawk. Nashoba moved ahead, signaling for them to follow. The path was treacherous, a mix of loose gravel, jagged rock, and narrow ledges that fell sharply into shadowed ravines. Liora supported Abram, each step a careful balance between speed and caution. After nearly an hour, they reached a small alcove hidden behind a curtain of sagebrush. Nashoba peered from behind the branches, noting the silence of the morning desert. "They've tracked us this far," he whispered, "but they will not find this passage. It is concealed. Move quickly and silently. Keep low. Follow my lead." The hidden pass opened into a narrow trail sloping steeply downward. Liora helped Abram step cautiously, his legs trembling with every motion. Nashoba moved ahead, turning occasionally to guide them with silent gestures. As they descended, Leora's mind wandered to the night's events. The way Nashoba had fought, his precision and strength, the confidence that radiated from him despite his wounds, it was unlike anything she had ever seen. She felt a strange mixture of awe and fear. The desert had thrown them into chaos, and yet here was a man who seemed almost part of the land itself, shaping survival with every calculated move. Abram cleared his throat. "I owe him my life," he muttered. "And not just mine. Yours too, Liora." She shook her head. "No, we owe each other survival. None of this would matter if we hadn't stayed together." Suddenly, the sharp crack of a branch echoed down the trail. All three froze. Nashoba's body tensed, every muscle coiled. Liora held her breath, feeling Abram's pulse against her chest. "They're close," Nashoba whispered. "Kade sent scouts." The fear that had been simmering now coiled into a tangible, biting thing in Liora's stomach. But she forced herself to move, one foot in front of the other, Abram leaning on her, trusting her despite his pain. Nashoba glanced back, eyes meeting hers for a brief, piercing moment. "You are brave. That is your weapon now. Courage, not guns, will carry you through this." Liora swallowed hard, gripping Abram tightly. "We will survive this," she said quietly, though the words felt fragile. The trail curved sharply, descending into a narrow ravine where the rocks towered overhead, concealing them from view. Nashoba moved ahead to scout, his figure cutting through the early morning light like a shadow born of the earth. He returned swiftly, gesturing for them to follow. At last they emerged into a hidden clearing, shielded by thick brush and stone. For the first time in hours they could breathe freely. Abram sank to the ground, exhaustion overtaking him. Liora collapsed beside him, brushing dust from her clothes. Nashoba stood a few feet away, surveying the horizon. "We are safe for now," he said. "But Kade's reach is long. We cannot linger. We move at first opportunity, and we are prepared for anything." Liora glanced at him, the intensity of his gaze meeting hers. "I don't know what would have happened if you weren't here," she admitted softly. Nashoba's expression softened just a fraction. "You might have survived," he said. "Perhaps. But not together and not whole. Strength is not just muscle, it is the will to endure." Abram looked up at Nashoba, gratitude and shame etched across his face. "I understand now. Thank you." "Truly," Nashoba nodded, eyes returning to the horizon. "We are not finished. The desert is a long teacher, and Kade is a cruel one. But together, we may outlast him." Liora felt a fragile thread of hope weave through her chest. The night had nearly destroyed them, but the dawn had brought a chance. And for the first time, she felt the spark of a survival she hadn't known she possessed, anchored by trust, courage, and a warrior who had become more than an ally. He had become their shield. The sun hung low over the desert, painting the sky in streaks of orange and crimson. Liora tightened her grip on Abram's arm, his breathing still ragged from their arduous trek through the canyon. The hidden ravine behind them offered temporary safety, but Nashoba's dark eyes constantly scanned the horizon, every sense alert. "We're close," he said quietly. "Beyond this ridge lies the valley where Kade cannot follow without being seen. We'll be safe there if we move carefully." Abram groaned. "I'm not sure I can make it much farther." "You can," Liora said firmly. "We've survived worse." Nashoba motioned forward. "Keep low. We move as one." Step by careful step, they navigated the final stretch. Loose rocks crunched beneath their feet, but Nashoba's guidance kept them silent. His bare skin glistened faintly in the late afternoon sun, muscles taut, scars visible, long black hair falling over his shoulders like a dark waterfall. The tribal jewelry around his neck and wrists caught the light with every movement, a glimmering reminder of both culture and strength. Abram stumbled over a rock, catching himself on Liora's shoulder. She whispered, "You can do this," pressing him onward. Nashoba stopped suddenly, lowering his head, listening. Liora followed his gaze to the canyon floor, where distant shadows moved like creeping smoke. Kade's men. Still searching. Still hunting. "They're trying to circle around," Nashoba muttered. "If they spot us from below, we're exposed." Liora's heart pounded. "Then we fight?" Nashoba shook his head. "Not yet. Not if we can avoid it. We survive first. Then we choose how to act." They pressed forward, reaching the ridge just as the valley opened beneath them. The sight stole their breath, a vast expanse of desert dotted with scrub and rock formations, stretching to distant mountains. Here, Kade's men would have no cover, no way to track them unnoticed. Abram sank to his knees, exhausted. I don't know how we made it. You made it because you followed, because you survived, Liora said softly. Not just the desert, not just Nashoba, but because you didn't give up. Nashoba's eyes never left the horizon. Kade will come, he said. He will not forgive the loss of his prey. But from this vantage, we can anticipate his moves. And if he tries to strike, we will be ready. Liora studied the warrior beside her, his presence commanding yet calm. There was a wildness in him, yes, but also strategy, patience, and honor. She realized then that survival wasn't just brute strength, it was the mind, the instinct, and the courage to make impossible choices. Abram, still panting, looked at Nashoba. I owe you everything. Nashoba shook his head. You owe yourself the choice to live. Everything else is survival. A sudden movement in the distance caught Liora's eye, a flash of metal, a shadow among rocks. Kade's scouts. They were bold, reckless, unaware that the terrain now favored their prey. Nashoba crouched, eyes narrowing. Do not panic. They are far enough to hesitate. Wait for my signal. Liora's stomach churned with fear and adrenaline. Abram leaned against her, exhausted but alive, trusting her guidance. She felt the strange, unspoken bond between the three of them solidify a fragile alliance born of necessity, fear, and respect. Minutes dragged. Then Nashoba's hand lifted, fingers curling into a subtle signal. Move, quietly, swiftly, and stay close. They advanced together, slipping through the rocks and scrub, every movement measured, hearts racing. Kade's men appeared closer now, confusion written on their faces as they realized the trio had vanished from sight. Finally, Nashoba led them into a hidden grove, a small oasis of shade and water tucked behind a rocky outcrop. Liora gasped softly. For the first time since the nightmarish chase began, she felt hope tangible and unshakable. Abram sank to the ground, relief washing over him, exhaustion pressing him down. Nashoba surveyed the grove, satisfied. This will be our refuge for now. Kade cannot reach us here easily. We rest, heal, and prepare. Liora turned to him, gratitude and awe in her eyes. You saved us. More than once. He inclined his head slightly, expression unreadable but softening just enough. We saved each other. The desert does not forgive weakness. You proved your strength tonight. Abram, still leaning on Liora, murmured, I was a fool to doubt you. All of you. You were human, she replied gently. And now we endure together. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the valley. Liora looked at Nashoba, then Abram, then back at the desert stretching endlessly before them. The nightmare of pursuit had forged something unexpected, a bond between settler and warrior, fragile but real. Nashoba knelt by the small spring, dipping his hands in the water. We survived tonight, he said quietly. Tomorrow, we plan. Kade's reach is long, but our will is stronger. This land remembers courage. Liora exhaled, letting the weight of fear and exhaustion drain from her shoulders. For the first time in days, she felt the pulse of life returning. The alliance between the settler couple and the Apache warrior had been forged in danger, fear, and trust. And for now, that fragile alliance was enough. The desert stretched wide and wild, but for the first time, hope burned brighter than the horizon. And together, they would face whatever came next.